What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to another build video. Today we'll be looking at my stamina sorcerer, and for all of you who are new to the channel, this was actually my main before stamina kind of got nerfed a while back in Homestead. But a lot of you guys have been asking me if I could show my stamina characters and stam sorc again, and that's what I'm going to be doing today. I actually kinda was thinking about not doing a build for my stam sorc because the build I have right now is definitely for endgame, and I would say it's the hardest thing to complete. But in terms of skills and everything, you can use whatever you want, but if you want like maximum damage and you're trying to like impress your friends with show off stuff, it's definitely gonna be difficult to obtain every single weapon. So I am definitely going to be listing some replacements, but if you want top of the line gear, I'll show you what my build is, and just keep in mind that I'm pretty sure out of everyone that watches it, maybe like 5% of you might actually attempt this. So that's why I was kind of hesitant to make this video. But anyway, let's get off to a start with all our builds like we usually do. As usual, in the build, I have completed pretty much every single trial in the game, and yeah, so I know this works because of experience. So yeah, let's start off with the resources. And I'm a red guard. We have 57 into stamina and 7 into health. Now this health is just more of like a safety thing. You could technically dump all 64 into stamina and be fine, but I just like playing it a little bit safer. And yeah, so our mundus stone is the thief. Most DPS characters are going to always use the thief, and that's just standard. It doesn't matter what you're playing, magic or stam. It doesn't matter what class either. People are always going to be using the thief. So unless they do something to change the other mundus stones to make it completely like outclass it, pretty much every build that's DPS uses thief. Anyway, let's get into the items and everything. So let's start off with our two-piece monster set. We're using Beladret's two-piece set just because it does a huge burst, and in this game mostly the reason why we're using this is no matter what you do, whether it's like solo content, dungeons, or trials, for the majority of the event or whatever you're doing, there's going to be a lot of trash mobs, and you're going to have to fight more than one enemy. It's very rare to be doing full single target DPS. That's why Beladret is superior to like Krog or something. But like Krog is good for more single target, while Beladret does a higher burst in terms of AoE. So that's why we're using that. And I'm actually, for this build, I'm using 6-1, as in like 6 medium, 1 heavy. I don't really use 5-1-1 or 7-0 just because the survivability with 7-0 is a little bit lower, but you get more damage. But overall, I like playing it a little bit safer just because not dying is generally better than having maximum damage and being extremely risky. But whatever your playstyle is, you do whatever you want. I'm not telling you what to do. Here's what I do. So 1 heavy piece and then 6 medium. Whether your heavy piece is on your shoulder or helmet, it doesn't really matter as long as it's 6-1-1, which gives you the Undaunted passive. All of my enchantments are stamina except for the chest piece. Well, it doesn't really matter as long as it's a big piece like chest piece, legs, or helmet. It doesn't actually matter. But I have 1 health just to stay a little bit safe. All of it is divines as usual. And for my body pieces, I am using the Twice-Fang Serpent or the Two-Fang Snake. Simply because when you're doing damage as a stamina sorcerer, your rotation is really quick, and you should be able to stack your penetration 5-piece bonus really quickly and keep it up throughout a majority of the fight. So with all your dots up, that ability should never like run out, and if it does, you're probably doing something wrong, and that's why we're using that one. So Two-Fang Snake or the Twice-Fang Serpent set, it drops from Sanctum Ophidia only. You can get it in normal and vet, but if you want the golden jewelry pieces that come with it, you're gonna have to do veteran and get it from the final boss. But if you don't care about jewelry and you just want body pieces, you can just farm normal and you'll be fine. So that's one way to do it. And our second set that we're using is the Vicious Ophidian set. Now, we're actually using a 5-piece on it. That includes 2 weapons, which we'll get into a little bit later. The Vicious Ophidian or Vicious Serpent set, it comes from all Craglorn trials, which is Sanctum Ophidia, Hellraw Citadel, or Etherean Archive. Now, this is why I knew that this build wasn't going to be easy to obtain, because while you can get all the pieces from normal, the weapons and some of the pieces getting it into good traits are not so easy, so you're going to have to either farm it and run it quite often, or just get extremely lucky. So that's what I did. I really just farmed it. I've done all the trials like hundreds of times. And then that's what we're using. And we still use Vicious Ophidian because the 5-piece reduces the cost of your stamina abilities by 8%. And when you kill an enemy, you restore more stamina and you get a movement speed bonus. So if that 5-piece ever got nerfed, I'm pretty sure the Vicious Ophidian set would just be ruined. But overall, that's what I think, and that's why we're using it. So we have 3 jewelry pieces, all with weapon damage, and we have 2 swords of the Vicious Ophidian. Now, getting the weapons is probably the hardest thing to do for pretty much any set. Now, it took over a year for me to get my first sharpened weapon, and then, I don't know, I'm still looking for daggers. The reason why I only use swords is because I can't get daggers 3 years later. And so swords is still good. I would use them, but if they're not sharpened, honestly, I would just use a different set entirely, or just not use them if they're not sharpened. So swords and daggers are good. Maybe an axe if you want to have like a higher crit or something. More damage, but it's also more dependent on how you crit in the game. And for the first weapon, we have the weapon damage enchant, and then the next one we have poison damage. So that's why I use that. If I could get daggers, I would, but I can't. I've never gotten one. And the last part, this is a big part of the build where a lot of your damage is going to be coming from, the Maelstrom bow. It has to be sharpened. If it's not sharpened, I would honestly just recommend using something else. I understand not everyone is going to be able to get a Maelstrom weapon, and at that point, I mean, the build still works. You're just not going to be having any like impressive damage or anything, which is pretty concerning. But the good news is that stamina sorcerers can roll through Maelstrom fairly easily. I mean, you're still going to die here and there to dumb things, but after all the times I've done Maelstrom, I still think to this day, stamina sorcerers are the easiest ones to clear it. So yeah, let's go over some items in my bank that we're going to do some like replacements with. If you don't have all the things I listed, I would strongly recommend going with the Twiceborn Star set. Now this one, it could replace the Twice-Fanged Serpent, and instead of like having the extra penetration damage, you're going to have 2 Mundus Stones. And if you were to use this one, you would have the Thief and the Shadow, which increases your damage. It's slightly going to be lower than Twice-Fanged Snake, or Twice-Fanged Snake. Whoa, I just got them mixed up. Two-Fanged Snake. But anyway, this one is a craftable set. It is 9 traits, so you can either buy it from guild stores, ask your friends to make it for you, or you can craft it yourself. But this one's a interesting one. I used to use it, but if you can upgrade, then definitely do that. Another thing you can use in replace of that is the Red Mountain set. If you don't want to like actually start farming for items, the Red Mountain set can be bought and traded from like guild stores and all that stuff. Red Mountain's pretty solid. It does not as much damage, but it's still pretty good. I actually used to use this back in the day, and I still think it is a very solid set. Now, one other thing that would replace the Vicious Ophidian set, I honestly think that this one is harder to get, actually, because Alkosh pieces come from Maw of Lorcage, and honestly, I would say Maw of Lorcage is harder to do than like all the Craglorn trials. But if you don't want to use the Vicious Ophidian, Alkosh also works, and that also means when people toss synergies, which is quite often now in Morrowind, because resource management is a very big thing. You can definitely do that. We went over Twiceborn Star. Knife of Shadows, I say the Viper set for stamina, but like I've used it maybe once for testing. I really wasn't impressed with it, but I know some other people who had a lot of success for it, and just said good things about it. So I do have the weapons. You could farm this in Fungal Garado. I'm not sure if it was 1 or 2. I think it might be 2, but this is also a very interesting set to play with. But overall, I think those are some replacements. Celine's for the monster set, and yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Or of course, if you can farm Maelstrom weapons, if you want maximum damage, you would use 3 Vicious Ophidian and take out these 2 swords, which you'll still be getting the 3-piece, but you'll get Maelstrom daggers instead. If you were to use Maelstrom weapons only, I would highly recommend sharpened daggers only. If you don't have sharpened daggers, use something else. In terms of weapons these days, it's either you use sharpened or you're losing damage, and just use something else that's sharpened. So with that said, those are some of the replacements I would make. And there's one more thing that I had that I haven't really used much. I've actually had another set and I just kind of found these pieces, but I've tested Spriggans. And Spriggans is not something you should be using in group content. It's more for like solo gameplay or like small dungeons, because you do get quite a bit of penetration when it's all maxed out, but it doesn't help your team or anything, or it's just it doesn't give you any resources back. There's really not any reason to use it in group content. So Spriggans, you can buy it or you can just farm it in like world zones. Just keep in mind that this is not something I would highly recommend using ever, actually, but unless you're doing like solo content like Maelstrom Arena, I think Spriggans is perfectly fine there. And yeah, that's about it. So I know I just listed a lot of replacements. You can also like craft other things like Hunding's Rage. I think that's an easy one to like farm, or not farm, but like craft, and you can do that early on in the game as well. So, if anything, if you want to try the high-end build, the most important thing, or the most important set I would first go for is probably the Vicious Ophidian, and then after that, the Twice Fang Snake one, or the Two Fang Snake, it's good, it's really good, but it's not required for this build. If you want best in slot, then this is what it is, but any other 5-piece set would probably work for you. In terms of monster set, Veladreth is superior to the other ones for stamina, but whatever works for you. And Maelstrom Bow, you definitely want to go for this because it is a very huge increase in damage by a couple thousand, actually, if you're doing your rotation properly. So this is one thing you're going to have to look for. I know it's all RNG, and it may take you a day to get it. It could take you an entire year, or you may never get it. So that's one thing you have to just either keep farming or hope you get lucky. So next on our list is our abilities. This one is kind of the same as my old builds, actually, but some of the things I changed, we'll talk about the champion points later. So let's start off with our dual wield bar. This is going to be the bar that we're on most often. So first of all, we have our Steel Tornado ability. This is our AoE ability, so this is what it looks like, just in case you didn't know. It's a Steel Tornado. Kind of looks different. It makes a little blur around you. And then next we have Rapid Strikes. This is also in our dual wield. This is your main spammable attack. So at a area, you're going to be pretty much just spamming this ability most of the time in the fight. And then next we have Caltrops. Now this ability actually got nerfed, and I don't know, I wouldn't say nerfed or buffed in this thing. It's just in a weird spot. So Razor Caltrops, a lot of you guys may know, is the ability that you can toss and then it just hits everything. Now, what they did to change it after Morrowind is they reduced the cost of it by 50%. They also reduced the duration from 30 seconds to 12 seconds, so it no longer lasts as long. And the radius is now only 8 meters, so as you guys can see, the circle is a little bit smaller than before. Most of the time, caltrops is used in PvP situations, but sometimes people use it for like trash mobs and dungeons and whatnot. So this one is kind of your flex spot, which means you can change it out for whatever you want. You could use Deadly Cloak. That is also a very solid ability that I think most people would use. Rending Slashes, if you want more damage, that is always a good ability to have on instead. Or you could just use, honestly, whatever you want. This is the change spot for whatever you think is right. Next we have Hurricane. And Hurricane just gives you a lot of resistances and movement speed. So this is one of the abilities you should have up during a fight at all times. Make sure... This is one thing that I still need to work on myself. And I see a lot of people doing as well. So you're supposed to let the Hurricane run out before casting. Don't recast it like 1 second before it does. Because if you see the little Hurricane right now, every few seconds, the little circle gets bigger. And that means enemies caught in it, they take more, well, they don't take more damage, but just the radius gets bigger. So that's why you're supposed to let the Hurricane completely run out before recasting. And that's very important. So our final ability on our front bar is the Bound Armaments. And this one, you're going to have this on both bars, otherwise you're going to have to recast it. So it's just something you have on both bars. It gives you more stamina, and you deal more damage with heavy attacks. And it gives you resistances. And nowadays in Morrowind, heavy attacks are very important, so you're just going to be doing more heavy attacks. And then our front bar ultimate. This is something I actually switch out quite often between two different abilities. One, we have the Dawnbreaker ability. We have the Dawnbreaker of Smiting because I like the stun on this morph, whereas the other morph, I think the Flawless Dawnbreaker, does like 5% more damage. But the morph I use is the Smiting one, which stuns the enemies. So if you hit an AoE group, they all get stunned for like 2.5 seconds, which allows you to do more damage without taking any damage. So whatever morph works for you. I think they're both good. I just like the stun a little bit more. And our next ultimate that I currently have on is Rend. I mostly use this for bosses, and it kind of works because the radius of this is like a 7x8, whatever that means in this game. And it's a small, like, straight line forward ultimate. It doesn't cost as much, but it does quite a bit of damage, and it heals you over time. So if you're doing like a solo Maelstrom boss burn, that's the thing you see in most fights. And it heals you, so you don't have to always heal yourself midway, and that's good. So let's go on to our back bar. Let's start with 5 to 1. Bound Armaments, we have this once again on the back because we have to have it on both, otherwise it'll recast. Now, this is one thing that I've been playing with more often now. Well, like, seeing if it's still worth having. Critical Surge. Now, if you're doing solo, then yes, you're going to want to use this. But if you're doing full group content, you may have a good healer, and you may not actually have to run this because it gives you major brutality, which increases your weapon damage by 20% for 33 seconds. Now, this can be obtained by using a weapon power potion, and if you have a good healer, you don't actually need this ability at all. So this is also an ability where you can just put, like, I don't know, caltrops on the back and something else in spot 3 if you are playing with a good healer and you trust them. Now, next thing right here is Rearming Trap. Now, this one kind of got nerfed a little bit, but it's still used because of the damage. People use it to drop it on like portals, and that allows you to get some free damage. It also, I don't know, gives you more crit damage, but if you are running in a large group like a trial, someone, your like off tank will sometimes guard you. And when I say guard, I mean like the guard skill right here. There's one morph that essentially gives you the same effect as this, so you don't have to run trap. And what you would replace this with in that time is Resolving Vigor or Echoing Vigor, whatever you want. Now, in terms of these morphs, Echoing Vigor is usually the better one for group content, while Resolving is for solo content, because this one heals you for more, whereas the other morph has a larger radius. So that's the thing. Now, Endless Hail, this ability got nerfed. It now costs more to cast, but we still have to use it because the Maelstrom bow is, like, this is the reason why you're getting a high DPS. It increases the damage of volley. This ability is volley before the morph. And so I'm going to show you on the target dummy right here. When I cast Endless Hail, you're going to look at the numbers. Look at how it just goes up every time, and I'm not even doing anything. And every second you have Endless Hail, the tick is just like really high. And the reason why we have that is the Maelstrom bow increases the damage of volley by 161 per tick and increasing 56 every 0.5 seconds, and it gives you free damage. So with sharpened, it penetrates even more, so you're just getting overall higher damage. So that's where a lot of your damage comes from. This is one of your better abilities. If you have like a chart, it'll tell you that Endless Hail does most of your damage in a long-term fight. So that's why Endless Hail is the better morph if you have a sharpened bow. And then finally, we have Poison Injection. This ability actually used to be on the top, and then they changed it to the bottom because for some reason they didn't like people having Poison Injection at like level 4. And now you actually have to work for it these days. So it is still a very strong ability. It's also considered your stamina execute. And when I say execute, it means enemies below 50%. They take more damage by the poison effect. And it's a dot as well. So they're just taking a bunch of additional damage. And if you have your dots up at all times, then you should be good. So you just toss everything down. And then you can see on my buff tracker right there, that's how it works in a nutshell. So let's go on to our champion points because this is very important for Morrowind. Before I show you anything, I want to say that this is the champion point layout that works for me. It does not always work for everyone else. So if you found something that you like, just stick with it. But this is what works for me in trials and all that stuff. So let's go on to the green tree first. I have 30 into Warlord, 2 into Sprinter, 60 into Mooncalf, 100 into Tenacity. Tenacity is the new one that increases your magic and stamina based on heavy attacks, and as I mentioned earlier, you're going to be heavy attacking more often, as sustain is a very important thing. Mooncalf increases your stamina recovery. That's generally pretty good. I have 18 into Tumbling because I like to roll dodge more often, and 30 into Warlord. Now, you can take out all the points from Warlord and put it into Tumbling if you wanted to, or you could take out all the Tumbling points and put it into Warlord if you wanted to. And then I just like having the 2 extra points into Sprint or Sprinter because you do run a lot in most situations, so just having the reduced cost of that is quite helpful. But if there's anything you learn from the green tree, you want to max out Mooncalf and Tenacity first. I think Tenacity slightly more than Mooncalf, but overall it's pretty important. So we're going into our red tree now. This is kind of the same as my healer build because honestly it works for most of my classes. So 49 into Elemental and Hardy. And the reason why we don't have 90 points into each like pre-Morrowind is because they don't scale as well as it used to. So that means even if you have it at 90 points, you're still going to be taking more damage. That's why I took out 100 points in total out of these two, and then put some more into Thick Skin, which you reduce damage from dot, and put it into Ironclad, which is the new ability in the red tree, and it reduces damage you've taken from direct damage attacks. So let's say you get hit by a fireball, then that's considered direct damage. If it's targeted at you, not an AoE, then that's what direct damage means. And then Spell Shield, because we are a stamina character, and if you're trying to do competitive raids, not many people actually run stamina DPS in competitive scoring trials, but this build, it works for completion, And I mean, you could still do it, but it's just like you might die more often. And the reason why that people don't run stamina characters in trials anymore is not that your damage is significantly lower. It's more that we just don't have shields, and well, damage is actually kind of lower, but not like too much of a significance. But it's just we don't have shields where magic characters have shields. So in terms of competitiveness, one vitality bonus is worth 1,000 points, and that's really important when it comes down to like perfection. So since stamina doesn't have characters, there's a lot of one-shot mechanics in trials, especially the new ones, and you don't want to just die because you're out of shields, or simply in our case we do not have shields. So yeah, that's why we have that. And in our blue tree, this one is something that's going to be changed whether your playstyle is different than mine. This just works for me. Now, we have 56 into Mighty. I'm still playing around with this one, but I found that these are like the points where you get the most benefit without like soft capping at some point. If you have no idea what soft cap and hard cap is, it's like hard cap is where it completely stops, and so that would be 100 in this case. And soft cap is where you get a smaller diminishing return every time you put more points into it. So 56 is one of those points where you hit the soft cap and until your next jump point. So that's why we have 56 in Thaumaturge. Your AoEs, you have a lot of them. Endless Hail, Poison Inject, Caltrops occasionally. I think Caltrops is considered dot. And then Mighty is just your flat damage, you get increased. Piercing increases your flat damage as well. It's pretty much just penetration, so if you're using like Sharpened, it will do more. So this is something you have to play with depending on your group. If you are playing in a full raid group, you might take out some points into piercing, put it into like Mighty or whatever else, the other three you want to, because most likely enemies in trials, and if you're running with a good group, it's going to be full zeroed in resistances, and after that all these 26 points are going to be completely useless. So it really just depends on what you're doing. But Mighty, Precise Strikes, Thaumaturge are very important. You also want to get at least 75 points total to get the Exploiter, which you should, because you're putting all your points into here for the most part. So don't really worry about that one. The only thing I would really change is the Piercing, depending on what you're doing. Next, we have 16 points into Master at Arms. This is one of the soft cap before the next jump point. Master at Arms increases your damage done with direct damage, which is your endless, or not endless hail, but like your rapid strikes. So direct damage, if it's like damage from point A to point B, that is what it is without AoE. And that's really how I built my tree. So hopefully that gave you some insight of what I do. A few more things before I wrap this video up is potions. As usual, I do use the blue potion or blue food as usual. Max health, max stamina, because those are really the only two resources you use. And in terms of potions, weapon power potions are significantly cheaper than spell power potions, because not many people play stamina as much as magic these days in competitiveness. So essentially all of these are like the same thing. You get weapon damage, weapon crit, and stamina. So it's like you could get 2 of these potions for the price of 1 magic one, which is quite insane actually, because you run through like hundreds of these on the daily. So that's one thing to watch out for. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave it in the comments, and I'll try to answer it as best as possible. And if you have any other like concerns, like asking me why I use this, feel free to ask. I'll do my best to explain it. But overall, I think not many people are going to be using this build, just because like pretty much all of the weapons and gear here is hard to obtain. Like Cradle of Shadows, you can do it on vet. It's not, well, it's not hard for me, but it's considered one of the more challenging dungeons. And yeah, so Veladreth is not an easy one. Two-Fang Snake it's not hard to obtain either. If you like, Sanctum Ophidia is very puggable these days, and just getting it in the right trait is the hardest part. Same with the Vicious Ophidian. Well, actually, these days, with Vicious to fit in, you can only get it in robust, which is kind of good. So you don't have to worry about jewelry. If you just want the golden jewelry, you're gonna have to do like veteran or hard mode. But if you just want the set completion, blue is fine, purple is fine, whatever. But honestly, the weapons are probably the most challenging things to get in this game, because we all know, anyone who's ever tried to farm one specific weapon knows that getting it in the right trait could take you like months. So in my case, it took me like over a year just to get my first weapon, and then honestly it took me a few weeks after that to get my second weapon. And then in terms of the Maelstrom bow, I've run Maelstrom a couple hundred times, and to this day I've literally only gotten one sharpened bow, which is the one that's right here. And yeah, so with that said, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a fantastic day, and if you're new to the channel, feel free to hit the subscribe button, and I'll try to bring out more builds and more guides shortly. So see you guys later.